Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today is Friday, February 6, 2026.
And we are turning our full attention to the Middle East.
We are. If you've been following the headlines over the last couple of weeks, you know the situation in Iran isn't just heating up.
No, it's boiling over.
Yeah.
We are observing a convergence of mass protests, crushing economic sanctions.
And now, significant military maneuvering that has the potential to reshape the security architecture of the entire region.
It's a classic powder keg scenario.
Yeah.
But the mechanics of how it's unfolding, they feel distinct this time around. We aren't just looking at isolated pockets of unrest. We're seeing a systemic collision between internal instability and, external pressure.
Right. So our mission today is to strip away the panic and the rumor.
Exactly. We're going to look at the verified facts, the emerging patterns on the ground, and the strategic calculus of the decision makers involved. We aren't here to take sides.
No.
We are here to examine the reality of the situation.
We want the signal, not the noise. And speaking of signal, before we really unpack this crisis, I should probably mention that today's deep dive is generated by Stylo News.
Stylo News, right?
Now, if you aren't familiar with that name, you might know its bigger sibling, Stylo Intel Ops.
Oh, absolutely. That's the enterprise-grade platform,
Yeah.
the heavy-hitting intelligence software used by government agencies, military operations,
Major corporations, right?
major corporations, all to track global risk and supply chain disruptions.
Well, Stylo News is the consumer application of that exact same engine, and it's brought to you by our sponsor, ProWave AI.
So it essentially gives you, the learner, access to the same grade of intelligence tools that global decision makers are using.
Exactly. So if you want to track complex events like this Iranian crisis without the spin, Stylo is really the tool to use.
Let's get into the briefing then.
Let's do it. Let's start on the ground, inside Iran. If you look at the timeline, late 2025, it felt like a slow burn of unrest.
It did.
But moving into January 2026, the data shows a really distinct shift in intensity. We know the economy was the trigger, currency collapse, inflation, but this feels like it's mutated into something else entirely.
The initial spark was absolutely economic. I mean, when the currency devalues to a point where families are struggling to buy basic staples, the social contract it breaks.
Right.
But what we're seeing now is the rapid evolution from that economic grievance to explicit political dissent.
So the woman life freedom movement.
Exactly. It's resurfaced with a renewed momentum.
Yeah.
And the government's reaction this time, it suggests they view this as an existential threat to the Islamic Republic, not just a public order issue.
The numbers we're seeing on the crackdown are significant. Thousands of reported deaths, mass arrests. But I want to drill down on who is doing the arresting.
Okay.
We have reports of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, sweeping up over 130 riot organizers in just the last 2 weeks.
That is a critical distinction for the listener. The IRGC isn't your standard national army. It's an ideological military force, and its specific charge is protecting the regime's political system. They're active in provinces like Loristan, Khuzestan, and Yazd.
And these are areas with a history of unrest.
They are, but the intensity of this IRGC deployment indicates a loss of control by, say, local law enforcement. But the most alarming intelligence point from the Stylo report, it concerns what's happening on the streets of Tehran itself.
You're talking about the January 20th reports about the patrol?
Exactly. We have verified intelligence indicating the deployment of armed militias to secure government buildings in the capital. But, and this is the key insight, these aren't just Iranian Ba'athi forces.
So who are they?
The reports indicate the presence of foreign proxy fighters, specifically elements affiliated with Lebanese Hezbollah and the Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces.
Let's just pause on that for a moment. The Iranian government is flying in foreign fighters to patrol its own capital city.
It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does, for a regime that prides itself on national strength.
It's a massive signal of vulnerability.
Right.
I mean, if you're bringing in foreign nationals to police your own citizens, it implies you don't fully trust your own security forces. There's a fear within the leadership that a young Iranian conscript in the regular army, the Artesh, well, he won't fire on his own neighbors or family members.
But a fighter from Lebanon or Iraq.
Who's ideologically committed to the survival of the clerical establishment and is on the payroll. They don't have those same hesitations.
That paints a terrifying picture for the civilian population. And on top of that, you've got the information warfare aspect.
Yeah.
Internet blackouts are standard procedure now. But then we had that massive fire in Tehran on February 3rd.
And incidents like that fire thrive in a vacuum of information. With the internet throttled, rumors spread immediately.
The regime is burning evidence, or rebels attacked a facility.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the official line from Supreme Leader Khamenei remains consistent. He claims this is all foreign interference, specifically from the U.S. and Israel. He's framing the crackdown not as oppression, but as a defense of national sovereignty.
Which brings us to the international stage, because while Khamenei is blaming the West is fundamentally changing how it treats Tehran. We saw a massive diplomatic shift on January 29th from the European Union.
This is arguably the most significant diplomatic pivot regarding Iran in the last decade. The European Union has finally designated the IRGC as a terrorist organization.
To clarify for the listener, why did this take so long? I mean, the U.S. designated them years ago. Why was Europe holding back?
Leverage. For years, the EU wanted to keep diplomatic channels open, mostly to try and salvage the nuclear deal, the JCPOA.
So they thought if they labeled the IRGC as terrorists, they'd lose all ability to negotiate?
Precisely. Drive Iran further away. But the sheer violence of this recent crackdown, it changed the calculus. Look at Italy. Their foreign minister, Antonio Tajani, was historically cautious, prioritizing trade.
And now?
Now he is one of the loudest voices advocating for this designation. He cited the violent suppression of protesters as the absolute red line.
And Iran's reaction was immediate.
Aggressive would be an understatement. They summoned the Italian ambassador, warned of destructive consequences, but the diplomatic wall is being built brick by brick. Just a few days later, February 2nd, Ukraine followed suit.
And officially designated the IRGC as a terrorist organization.
They did.
Now, Ukraine's motivation feels distinct here. They aren't just reacting to the protests in Tehran.
No, for Kyiv, this is personal and strategic. President Zelensky was very clear. Yes, they stand with the protesters, but remember, Iran has been the primary supplier of Shahed drones to Russia.
The suicide drones slamming into Ukrainian cities.
Yes. Plus, you have the unresolved trauma of the Ukrainian passenger plane shot down by the IRGC in 2020. So by designating them terrorists, Ukraine is essentially saying we are at war with this entity.
It seems like a global squeeze. We're even seeing movement in Latin America. The U.S. is leaning on Bolivia to follow Argentina's lead.
It is. It's a coordinated effort to isolate the regime financially and politically. If you're designated a terrorist organization, it becomes incredibly difficult for any bank anywhere in the world to touch your money without facing secondary sanctions.
And they're targeting individuals, too.
Right. The U.S. just sanctioned Iran's Interior Minister, Iskandar Momeni. They're targeting the individuals giving the orders, trying to create personal liability.
So we have the regime fighting its own people with foreign mercenaries, and the diplomats cutting off the financial lifelines. That leads us to the hard power, the military escalation. Because words are one thing, but aircraft carriers
are another thing entirely. That's the escalation ladder we are now climbing. The U.S. has deployed the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group to the region.
So for those who might not follow naval maneuvers, what does a carrier strike group actually bring to the table? It's not just a boat.
It is a floating air force. You're talking about 70 to 80 aircraft, destroyers capable of shooting down ballistic missiles, and significant cruise missile capacity. It is a massive projection of kinetic power.
It signals to Tehran that the U.S. is not just watching.
No. They are positioned to strike if necessary.
And the rhetoric matching this deployment has been sharp.
President Trump has been explicit. He signaled readiness for military action if Iran pursues a nuclear breakout or, say, attacks U.S. interests. And CENTCOM, the U.S. Central Command, has issued very specific warnings about unsafe naval conduct.
Drawing a line in the water.
Literally, to prevent harassment of commercial shipping.
So how does a regime that's already under so much internal pressure respond to a carrier group parked on their doorstep? Do they back down?
Historically, they lash out. It's what we call asymmetric escalation. On February 1st, the Iranian parliament speaker, Mohammad Baker Kalibaf, declared that European armies are now considered terrorist groups by ORAN.
Tit for tat.
A tit-for-tat retaliation for the EU's move, yes.
But calling the French or German army a terrorist group that's quite a leap.
It is, but it legitimizes attacks against them in the eyes of their proxies, and the military rhetoric backs it up. General Salami of the IRGC warned of total war. But the real strategic nightmare isn't just the rhetoric. It is the Strait of Hormuz.
The choke point.
The choke point. About 20 to 30% of the world's oil supply moves through that narrow strip of water.
And Iran has threatened to close it.
They have. If they mine that strait or start sinking tankers, global energy prices will skyrocket overnight. We're seeing conflicting reports about drills there right now. The U.S. says don't do it. Iran denies they're doing it. But the threat, it hangs over the entire global economy.
And in this tense environment, accidents happen. There was a report on January 31st about an explosion in Bandar Abbas.
And that is the fog of war in action. Bandar Abbas is a major naval base. Reports indicate an explosion killed a senior IRGC naval commander. Was it sabotage? A drone strike? An accident?
We don't know.
We don't have verified confirmation. But in this climate, every explosion looks like an act of war to the people with their fingers on the triggers. It just increases the chance of a miscalculation.
I want to pivot here because there's a piece of this puzzle that often gets missed. We talk about sanctions, isolation, but these regimes are surprisingly resilient. They need money to pay those foreign mercenaries we talked about. So how are they funding this if the banks are closed?
This is where the Stylo report pulled out a fascinating insight regarding the hidden economy. It all comes down to cryptocurrency.
Crypto? You mean they're running the state on Bitcoin?
Bitcoin, stablecoins like Tether. The report details a surge in crypto usage within Iran. It hit a record $7.8 billion in volume in 2025 alone.
That is a massive amount of capital moving outside the traditional banking system.
And it's serving a dual purpose. For the average Iranian citizen, it's a lifeboat.
To hedge against inflation.
Exactly. You convert your rials to Bitcoin to survive. But for the IRGC, it's a sanction-busting superweapon. They can use it to pay for imports, move assets across borders, and even conduct weapon sales without ever touching the SWIFT banking system that the West controls.
But wait a minute. If they're shutting down the internet to stop protests, doesn't that kill their ability to trade crypto?
It complicates it, certainly. But remember, the regime controls the digital infrastructure. They can create whitelists for specific IP addresses or maintain dedicated fiber lines for government operations, while the rest of the country is dark.
It shows a level of adaptability we shouldn't underestimate.
Absolutely. They're building digital tunnels to keep the money flowing, even while the country burns.
So they have a financial workaround. But money can't buy loyalty forever. Are there other cracks in the regime's armor?
The cracks are widening. We're seeing reports of Iranian diplomats seeking asylum or defecting. When the people whose job it is to represent the regime abroad start jumping ship.
That's a leading indicator of internal collapse.
It is. They see the writing on the wall. Plus, there is intelligence suggesting massive corruption within the IRGC leadership, illicit transactions worth billions. When the ship takes on water, the officers start looting the cargo.
And yet, despite the total war threats and the looting, there is this weird, almost contradictory glimmer of diplomacy.
It's the paradox of survival. While they're shouting at Europe and designating armies as terrorists, there were reports as recently as February 3rd of back-channeled diplomatic talks between Iran and the U.S. taking place in Istanbul.
That feels schizophrenic. Aircraft carriers on one side, secret meetings in Istanbul on the other.
It's standard statecraft for a regime in this position. Iran views this as an existential situation. They cannot win a conventional war against the U.S. and a united Europe. They know that.
So they're looking for an off-ramp.
Exactly. They engage in these quiet talks to see if there's a way to de-escalate without losing face, all while keeping their hand on the hilt of the sword just in case the talks fail.
It is a high-stakes poker game. Let's try to pull this all together for the listener. We've covered domestic chaos, international condemnation, military brinkmanship, and shadow economics. What does the big picture look like?
We are looking at a regime facing a perfect storm. Internally, they've lost the consent of a significant portion of their population. Externally, they've lost their diplomatic cover in Europe.
That bridge is burned.
It is.
Yeah.
Economically, they're relying on shadow systems like crypto because the main doors are closed. And militarily, they are staring down a superior force.
And the decision-makers facing them are unusually united.
The West US, EU, Ukraine has aligned on that terrorist designation. That is a unified front we just haven't seen in years.
What about the other big power players? Where are Russia and China and all this?
That's the wild card. Russia actually withdrew some forces near Bushehr recently. That signals they're worried about getting caught in the crossfire.
They don't want another front.
No, not while they're still fighting in Ukraine. China, however, continues to purchase Iranian oil. That is the financial lifeline keeping the lights on in Tehran. As long as Beijing buys the oil, the regime has cash flow, regardless of what Europe does.
So, looking ahead to the next few days or weeks, what are the specific indicators we should be watching?
3 things. First, watch the implementation of the EU sanctions. Do they actually bite, or are they just symbolic? Second, watch the shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz. One mistake, one rogue commander firing a missile at a tanker, and we are at war.
And third,
The outcome of those quiet talks in Istanbul. The public rhetoric is loud, but the whispers in Istanbul will likely determine if this explodes or simmers down.
it's a fragile situation. It really highlights how quickly a regional flashpoint can threaten to go global.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a provocative question for everyone listening. We assume that sanctions and containment work the way they did in the 20th century. But in a world where billions of dollars move in crypto, where drones change the battlefield, and where proxy militias fight for foreign powers, does the old rulebook even apply anymore?
We might be using an outdated map for a brand new territory.
We might be.
That is a sobering thought to end on. We're going to wrap it up there for today. We hope this deep dive helped you verify the facts amidst the noise coming out of the Middle East. And if you want to keep tracking these global patterns yourself, you can use the exact same tool that generated the report for this deep dive.
That's right. Stylo News. It's available as a mobile and computer app. You can download it and customize your own personal intelligence-style briefs from hundreds of traditional sources and even social platforms like X.
Stop scrolling through the noise and get the signal. You can subscribe at www.stylonews.com for AI-powered news on demand.
It really is the best way to stay ahead of the curve.
Thank you so much for listening to this deep dive. We appreciate you trusting us with your time.
We certainly do.
If there's a specific topic you want us to cover next, let us know. And please follow Stylo News on social media for updates. Stay curious, stay informed, and we will catch you in the next one. Goodbye.